What's up YouTube, Capital G here, talking about competitive Yu-Gi-Oh in this video and how low-key the game is absurdly expensive right now. This is something that I don't know if everyone has noticed because I haven't seen a ton of Yu-Gi-Tubers talking about this, but doesn't it feel like the price of entry for competitive Yu-Gi-Oh is just completely out of whack and it's kind of ridiculous right now? It actually reminds me a lot of some of the older eras of Yu-Gi-Oh, like GX and 5Ds, where no matter what type of deck you were looking to pick up competitively, you knew you were just going to have to pay an arm and a leg and essentially have to like get a second mortgage or something like that to pay for that deck. Anyways, if you guys like these type of discussion videos, just let me know in the comment section below or by giving the video a like. I'm not sure if people sometimes get annoyed with the way that I constantly bring up the older eras of Yu-Gi-Oh, GX, 5Ds, and Zexal, but just understand that I do this not just to reminisce about the good old times, but also to help newer players understand what the game was like before they started playing. It helps me convey my points a little bit easier, and I feel like right now it feels very similar to GX. No matter what type of deck you're looking to play, it just feels incredibly expensive. It feels like there are some giant paywalls in the game, at least from a competitive standpoint. I actually went back from the video that I put out yesterday, and I was looking at Aaron Furman's Pro Play Games spiral list, the list that he made top 16 with, and I was absolutely shocked. I didn't even bother pricing this entire thing out. I just looked at some of the cards in his deck and I saw 3 copies of Pot of Extravagance, 3 copies of Magician Soul, and then a whopping 3 copies of Appaloosa, Bow of the Goddess, and I was like, wait a minute, isn't that $1,000 just there on 9 cards? That is absolutely fucking ridiculous. And I know that obviously you don't have to choose to play spirals in this particular manner. You don't have to run the extravagances, which means you don't have to run 3 copies of Appaloosa. But even when you look at a lot of the other decks that were making the top cut, and I'm not even just using this event as an example, you can look at regionals too, it really feels like the cost of entry for Yu-Gi-Oh in competitive is just really high right now. And when I first really thought about this in detail, I thought that everything was linked to 3 cards directly. The 3 cards I just mentioned, Magician Souls, Extravagance, and then Appaloosa, Bow of the Goddess. But then I started thinking about it more and I was like, no, that's not completely true. These 3 cards definitely do connect to a lot of the decks for competitive and even the categories of decks that you might want to play. And let me explain what I'm talking about. I feel like if you generally want to play the game of Yu-Gi-Oh, a deck that you're going to build is going to fall into one of 4 categories, either combo, control, stun, or the last one is troll. That's basically any deck that's a dedicated FTK and or like a Mystic Mind burn deck. Any deck that just exclusively wants to stall or just kind of wants to kill you in the first turn, that definitely falls under troll. And essentially all 4 of those categories kind of go back to these cards. Now, of course, there are exceptions to the rule, but let's just say that you want to play a combo deck for like the next YCS. You're a player who loves being able to do a lot of things and build big boards, etc., etc. If you're looking at spirals, well, you're definitely going to have to pick up 3 copies of Magician Souls, and at minimum, I'd say 1 copy of Appaloosa. All right, well, maybe you want to play Luna Lights instead. It seems that the best builds of Luna Lights are now starting to play Magician Souls as well, and you also are going to have to, at minimum, play 1 Appaloosa, roughly like an $80 to $100 card. Maybe you even want to play something like Burning Abyss, still going to need Appaloosa for that. All right, well, let's switch it up. Let's just say that you want to play a control deck. You want to play Ultrageist, or you want to play something like Guru Control. Well, you're definitely going to need 3 copies of Extravagance for that. See where I'm going with this? Doesn't it feel like if you were to make a completely unbiased, well, it's pretty early in the format, so let's just say top 7 best decks, that basically 5 to 6 of them would need to run at least one of these cards, which defaultly makes them fairly expensive, especially for maybe a budget player. Kind of feels that way right now, doesn't it? But again, it's not just completely about these cards in particular being expensive. Some of this fault kind of falls on Konami. Let's be real, they just announced that they weren't going to do any more short printing when it comes to core booster sets, and obviously that's amazing. I think short printing is a pretty horrible practice, but let's be real, it doesn't solve the issue that we currently have in the game where some of the most expensive cards used in competitive decks are just short prints. Number one, not short printing in core booster sets, that doesn't affect something like Magician Souls. That's not coming out of a core booster set that's coming out of a legendary duelist. So even if Konami would have did this, I don't know, for the last 5 years, Magician Souls could have still been a short printed card in North America, hence it would still be crazy expensive. And if you don't think short printing is the absolute worst, just talk to any hero player. Like, they'll tell you how bad it is. They'll tell you about how they're essentially shelling out $500-ish for a deck that's probably not even a top 2 combo deck in Yu-Gi-Oh! I think Spiral and Lunar Lights are significantly better than Heroes. Maybe you could say Heroes is better than Burning Abyss, maybe vice versa, whatever. But it's a deck that is insanely expensive, and most of it's because of short printing. And actually, let me amend that, because I don't know 100%. I probably should have watched one of John's videos or researched it, but I'm fairly certain that Evil Hero Malicious Bane and Adustor Gold are both short printed cards, which is why they are well over $100 a piece. I mean, imagine that. Wanting to pick up a deck that Konami is clearly pushing. Konami clearly wants us to play Heroes, which is why they've been in the last 2 legendary duelists, but you can't just because of short printing. Like, that's the only reason that those cards are over $100, and it keeps on happening. This actually reminds me a little of when Crush Card Virus got its first mass release, and this story is so crazy, a lot of you guys don't even fucking believe it, but just know with the first ever Gold Series, Konami revealed that Crush Card Virus was going to be in there, and that card alone just ensured the entire concept of like the Gold Series was going to be a success in the TCG. So they put Crush Card in there because they knew players wanted it. It was only available as like a Shonen Jump prize card, but then they went ahead and short printed the card. And I think it might have actually been Upper Deck who did this at the time, but just know that it was a $300 card out of a fucking Gold Series. Could you even fathom that today? Konami releases a new Gold Series next year and you have a $300 card. Like, it's almost unthinkable, but that actually happened, and that can be the result of short printing. We've seen in the past examples like the Necros of Brionic, initially a $180 card just because it was short printed, 1 per like 6 boxes or some shit like that. Short printing can definitely affect the meta in a significant way, and even beyond that, I think Konami sometimes just drops the ball when it comes to reprints. Now, I'm not going to act like Konami doesn't give us amazing reprints every year, because they absolutely do. 2019 was a great year for reprints, and it looks like 2020 is going to be a strong year for reprints as well, but sometimes they just make decisions that are quite frankly puzzling. Take for example Ghost Sister and Spooky Dogwood. It came out in Dark Neo Storm, I believe last May. It was obviously a card that many people were excited about, despite the fact that it's not that good, just because people really like the Ghost Sister hand traps. They're very popular. Konami knows this, so they printed her as a secret rare. That was to be expected. What did Konami do almost immediately after Dark Neo Storm was released? Oh yeah, they announced that they were reprinting her in Dual Devastator. Like, what? Like, she didn't even, it wasn't even 6 full months until they had already reprinted the card. So why not do that with something like Phantasme, which came out before Ghost Sister and Spooky Dogwood was seeing way more play competitively and probably even casually, and yet even to this day that card doesn't have a reprint. So it feels like sometimes Konami is very random in their reprinting. How many freaking reprints do we have of like Foolish Burial Goods and Effect Failure? They're almost memes at this point. And when I think of Yu-Gi-Oh competitively and how sometimes their reprinting blunders kind of affect the meta, look at an archetype like Madoche and how expensive a lot of the best Madoche cards. And before somebody says, Cap, they've already announced they're reprinting the Madoche cards. Yeah, that's fine, but why didn't they print them last year? You know, the year where they gave us back-to-back core booster sets that had Madoche support. I mean, seriously, Konami gave us a Madoche card that pretty much redefined the entire archetype in Savage Strike, and then they followed that up with a nice support card in the form of the Teacher, the Exceed, and Dark Neo Storm, yet they didn't even think about reprinting any of the Madoche cards? Like, how does that make sense at all? Especially because it's a fucking Zexal archetype, and half the cards haven't been reprinted. Like, you didn't think maybe somebody might want to consider playing Madoches after you gave them support in back-to-back sets? We saw how Madoche performed after they got their new support. They have a continual stream of regional top 8s, and it's just like, well, for an entire year, you either had to pay like $350 for a core of Madoche, or just, wait until Konami inevitably reprints them? That doesn't really feel right. It doesn't sit right with me. So even though Konami is giving us those Madoche reprints that we deserve, it does kind of feel ultimately a day late and $1 short. And I think one of the things that bugs me the most is how there really aren't that many options for a lot of the cards that I've talked about in this video. I mean, like, Yu-Gi-Oh is a game that has over 9,000 cards, and usually you can find replacements to stuff. For instance, the reason that I never complained all that much about Fantastical Dragon Phantasme when it was like, an $80 to $100 card is because there were so many other good hand traps that you could run. But what's the option for Pot of Extravagance? Like, what is your substitute for that? If you're playing a deck like Altergeist, don't tell me I'll just run Pot of Desires. Okay, you're going to use Desires in Altergeist. You're going to resolve your Desires, banish your one Faker, and realize, oh shit, I lost. You're going to banish your 2 copies of Sequidius and not be able to bounce anything for the remainder of the duel. I think I'll close this video out by saying, even with the cards that are super expensive and are currently defining the meta, even with Konami's short printing fails and the reprinting blunders, there are still definitely some budget options out there. You can still play Salamangreat or what's left of Striker and or Draco, despite the fact that all 3 of those archetypes I just named objectively got significantly worse from the FNL list. There are still options to play. It just feels like too much of the meta is kind of locked behind these expensive ass crazy cards, and a lot of times the reasons for the cards being expensive are not even legitimate, and that kind of frustrates me because it really does feel like we're in some of the older eras of Yu-Gi-Oh. But whatever you guys think, leave that in the comment section below. And if you guys like more discussion, or you guys would like to see more discussion videos like this in the future, leave that in the comment section below as well. Thank you guys for watching. As always, subscribe if you have not already, and turn on that notification bell for daily videos.